This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, and we take a look at the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 15th of July 2020, and I am Diane.
I'm Tom.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, tyranny of numbers hits debate on county cash. In the Standard, Raila, Ruto fight Uhuru cash plan. And in the Star, 8 Mount Kenya bigwigs tussle to succeed Uhuru. Shall we begin with the Star?
Sure. So the Star is telling us that there are 8 top shots, Kikuyu ones, who are lined up to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta. And on the cover of the Stars, you can see there, the pictures are there: Peter Kenneth, Mwangi Kiunjuli, Martha Karua, Francis Kimemia, Anne Waiguru, and Mwangi wa Iria. Mwangi wa Iria in particular is very ready. In fact, he has already set up a presidential secretariat for himself, operating from somewhere in an upscale estate in Nairobi. So the article is also, of course, talking about the intentions of the BBI proposal, and in particular the intention to expand the executive. So it is in light of this that these leaders from the very populous, they're saying 7.9 million Mount Kenya region, are lining themselves up to clinch the wider posts that will be available to them come 2022. What if Uhuru Kenyatta becomes the Prime Minister in 2022? What will these guys do?
I'm telling you, this is so not wise of them, and especially those fellows who are trying to succeed him and on his side. See, one thing I know is that the presidency is a very jealous institution. I mean, how dare you try to succeed me when my time has not come? What are you telling me? See, this is Peter Kenneth, there's Martha Karua, there's all these fellows. One thing they also don't realize, DM, is that things could change in just a matter of months. We are going to go into a parliamentary system. You will not be able to succeed someone just like you do it in the presidential system. In a parliamentary system, more often than not, the person who's the leader of the party will probably become prime minister. The person who the coalitions come together to choose will probably become leader of government. And then you probably have a ceremonial president. So then how are they deciding to come up with a presidential campaign secretariat? And yet things might change in just a couple of months. I don't think they're showing their hand.
They're using an older man.
But in their defense, some of them have not declared the intention to run for president, but the Star has just fixed them there as potentials in the future. So it's not out of their own declaration. But the other thing that I noticed as I was reading the article, I was thinking it's so unfortunate that the list of the potential people that can head a country of 45 million people is just premised on their Kikuyuness and not on any one of their presidential credentials.
Nothing wrong with that.
Fact of life.
But two things. One is a professor is the one who usually says about succession, particularly in the GEMA nation. It's either you are anointed, as Uhuru Kenyatta was, or you wrestle for the leadership, for the mantle of leadership in the community, as Matiba did back in 1992. He wrestled it away from Kibaki, who was the heir after Jomo died, and so these guys have to. So what they're trying to do here is to wrestle. Some of them might decide to go the anointed route, and so rather than wrestle for that control, they will stick very close to Uhuru Kenyatta in the hope of being anointed the successor, because one day he will pass on the mantle to somebody.
Absolutely.
And so this is what they're anticipating.
So some of them will eventually be president when they're Gukas and Shoshos like Moi Kibaki.
Yes, and not necessarily just president, but even just custodians of the interests of GEMA. In government, not necessarily presidents, because if we do amend the constitution, we don't necessarily have to have a president from this populist community, as long as they're in government in some one way or form. Anyway, that is that's the Daily Nation. I think
The Star.
Sorry, the Star. We put that in the parking bay.
Yeah.
As we consider the Daily Nation.
Yes.
Tyranny of numbers.
Yes. Tyranny of numbers hits debate on county cash. Now, there's been a stalemate in the Senate on the proposal that would favor densely populated regions in the allocation of money to counties. Now, the CRA, Commission on Revenue Allocation, has come up with how many criteria? 10-part criteria on how counties will share revenue, and it's based on this. They have criteria number 1, health index, accounts for about 17%. Agriculture accounts for 10%. Population, 18%. Poverty, 14%. Basic share, 20%. Land area, 8%. Rural access, 4%. Urban households, 5%. Fiscal effort, 2%. And prudence index, 2%. Now,
so right off the bat, if you have a greater population,
definitely
the formula will be skewed to your advantage.
Precisely.
That's it.
Now, my thinking here is this is a very clever introduction of the proportional representation narrative, right? And I find this fantastic because I think in the past we have been using the formula based on number of kilometers to
square kilometers
to allocate revenue. Yes, but now this is one person, 1 shilling. Right? 1 person, 1 shilling. Now it means this, that if Kiambu has 2.4 million people, for example, and Mandera has 400,000 people, for example, the amount of money the Exchequer is actually going to allocate to these counties, it means every resident will get a proportional share of what is due to them, right? And therefore, this feeling of other counties have been given more money than others, or other counties need more money than others because of whatever reason, will cease to exist. Now, whatever you bring to the table is how much you'll be given, and I think that's the way we should go.
But that's proportional allocation, not proportional representation.
No,
proportional representation would be saying that from Central Kenya we need 300 members of parliament.
Whichever way you look at it, because that is the argument that's going to come to the parliamentary system, if at all you're going to have one. If you're going to have 2 million people in Kiambu, you might have to have more constituencies than you have in Mandera or Garissa or Wajir. And that's why I used very deliberately proportional representation, not proportional allocation.
But more importantly, this proportional allocation is a bone of contention which will stall the allocation of funds for the next fiscal year, which I think is very problematic in itself, because we right now are in very extraordinary circumstances. I mean, the counties as it is are grappling with, in addition to everything else, the pandemic, and we don't know how this is going to pan out. So I think it will be very extremely irresponsible of the senators.
But let me give you the logic of the party leader. If he has fumigated the party in the last 100 days quite successfully, why should he wait another year to rectify the formula? And one of the cardinal principles of democracy is proportionality.
Absolutely.
To everyone according to
what you bring to the table.
To what your size is. And so his logic
is what you bring to the table.
And so his logic is, if I've whipped everybody into submission, I might as well bulldoze this proposal, which in any case is really the correct manner in which we should be allocating funds in the first place. And that's why it's probably going to
You see, I saw this, the chairperson of CRA, Jen Kiringai. She said something that makes a lot of sense. It's not about equality, it's about equity. And it's also about bringing counties that are lagging behind in so many socio-economic ways up to par with those that are not.
And that's what the equalization fund is for, and it's in the constitution.
But an equalization fund cannot continue in perpetuity, can it?
No.
So I like their rationalization, but it needs to be rationalized further. I'm not saying that I'm for or against, but I think that now is a really questionable time to be wrangling.
Let me put it this way: the person who created
Kikuyus are saying
the person who created this was this is genius. This is genius. And by the way, it is not late. Do you know the financial bill Uhuru Kenyatta signed in the financial year 2019-2020?
The ayes have it.
Yes, it was signed in November 2019. Now, if going by precedence, I think we have time to discuss this, and let's give it. It is an emotional issue because counties, I'm sure the Somalis will come out tomorrow and say, no, we cannot give that. That we have always enjoyed the benefits. And this other tribe will come and say, oh no, we want this. Kikuyus will come and say, oh, we want this.
Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, consensus has to be built.
My admiration is with people like Johnson Sakaja from Nairobi and Professor Sam Ongeri from Kisii, who come from populous constituencies but are opposing the bill. Those are signs of leaders who think,
Sakaja,
who apply their
Sakaja,
minds and don't go down the populist route but take on the nationalistic outlook.
At the end of the day, Sakaja
Otherwise,
and Co will toe the party line.
This is mob thinking.
They will toe the party line.
Lady and gent, in the interest of time,
sure.
let me just let me carry on. We have a three-part criteria that we use. We have a three-part criteria that we use to assess the headlines. Are they topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and finally thoughtful or just plain lazy? I would say that we put the Daily Nation in the parking bay and consider this standard. And let me just expand a little bit on this tussle in the Senate. And so what the standard is saying is that the regions which are likely to lose money, and this is about 20 billion shillings, we're saying will be reallocated from the coast, from lower eastern, from the Maasai counties, from northern Kenya, and even parts of western Kenya. So 20 billion will be taken away from there and be allocated to the more populous communities. Now, as you can see there, those are counties that historically have been the strongholds of Raila Odinga. These are also the counties, the standard tells us, these are also the counties that William Ruto is courting for his presidential bid. And so this is why Raila's camp and Ruto's camp are on the same page in regard to these proposals. Raila is obviously defending his strongholds, and Ruto is continuing to woo these places, and that's why people like Murkomen and Co are not necessarily supporting this. And that's basically the alliance right now between the unlikely alliance between ODM and Ruto's wing of Jubilee in this matter. Let's see in the coming days what happens. I think we...
2M's projection is that people will toe the party line.
They will toe the party line.
You strike while the iron is hot, you make hay when the sun shines.
I mean, that is true. That is probably what will happen, but I still think that it is unfortunate that in replacement of applying your mind and thinking, it is the party that will determine the direction you will take.
We need more decisive party direction like this for the country, for progress.
Maybe we need military leaders to head party.
I think the Nation is a strong contender for the winning headline.
I agree.
I agree.
I'll toss the standard, and I'll also toss the Star, and so our winning headline comes from the Daily Nation. And out of the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, we have a three-part criteria that we use to assess the cartoons. Are they humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy? What have we got in the Daily Nation?
You have a caricature of, I suspect, that is Mutahi Kagwe, Minister of Health, and he's addressing members of the press, and he's dressed in PPE from top to his stomach, and then down he's wearing shorts and a pair of sneakers, and he's saying we have enough personal protective equipment. And I think this is with regard to a question he was asked a couple of days ago about Kenya's quantity of PPE, whether we have enough PPEs in the country, and he says we have more than enough. But I think Ndula here has become a little bit pessimistic.
I think Ndula's cartoon has actually been informed by the recent infection of healthcare workers. Was it 45 of them or 25? I can't remember the number. Because logically, PPE would be allocated to people who are in the front lines. So if there's such a mass infection, then it suggests that they don't have PPE.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Do you want to put that in the parking bay?
I think we put it in the parking bay. I like it.
All right.
And it's
Yep,
also
'cause you-
representing how 2M and GEM are under the table today. Suits at the top and
Don't
And
make
shots
us.
at the
Shorts
bottom.
at the
Don't make us.
We're going for a jog after this with 2M.
In the Standard.
Yes, in the Standard, we have a cartoon of campaign promises. And so here we have a caricature of Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera as a snake shedding his skin, which characterizes campaign promises. And he's reported to have said during the campaign trail that this new Malawi will get rid of nepotism and cronyism. And the little character there says that was fast. And the relevance here is Chakwera, within 10 or so days after being sworn in, has already broken a number of promises. And he's allegedly appointed 6 figures who are related to each other in his 31-member cabinet. Here they are. The new Labour and Health ministers are brother and sister. And the incoming information minister is a sister-in-law of the new Deputy Agriculture Minister.
Yes.
He's such a blatant man. I think he either overestimates himself or underestimates the intelligence of the Malawian people. Because now this is not going to fly.
Let me tell you, I don't think this guy is wrong. J.F. Kennedy appointed his own brother as Attorney General.
Twem, you've gone back to your usual argument of if white people are doing it, we do it.
Donald Trump himself has appointed his biggest advisor, Ivanka Trump, his daughter, as his biggest economic. In fact, she tweeted on his own behalf, saying Kenya is the best partner of the U.S. trade. Look,
it's not going to fly, and you are drawing from people from 1960 and the Trump family.
Rousseau has told us that this thing called democracy is overrated. That elective democracy comes from elective aristocracy. Now, if you are building a state and government, and you want to exercise hegemony, you don't give people because of merit. You give people who you trust.
You'll tell me in a few weeks. You'll tell me in a few weeks when we will see where Chakwera will be. The thing about it is that Malawians, yes, and Africans in general, were really celebrating Chakwera because he beat the system, and he used the system's institutions, like the Supreme Court, to nullify the election of the incumbent and became president.
Fantastic.
Weeks later, he does that which he said he would not do. It's not going to go well for him because, as you have seen, Malawians, their index of participation in politics is even higher than Kenya's. You'll tell me to
let me tell you, the currency of politics is lies. If you are in a democracy and you believe you're a politician, the problem is not with the politician, it's with you.
I'd rather believe a politician than somebody who says
what I do applaud Chakwera for is being unapologetic, unashamed and unapologetic. And he seems to be following the Machiavellian principle that the prince should do all the bad things at once.
And then the good things slowly.
Only slowly.
I think we should all.
And he started off on
$1,000 Malawian dollars to where Chakwera will be.
He started off on a bad note in terms of being selfish. And maybe that will get him to last longer than even usual in his seat. Anyway.
He's not being smart. He's not being smart.
In the eyes of the public.
He's digging his own hole. I'm not even saying that he shouldn't be he shouldn't practice nepotism, but do it in a clever way, man.
No.
Be smarter.
No. Just be who you are. Just do you. Just be
like Trump.
We'll see.
Absolutely. You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose.
We'll see how it goes.
And that's what's happening here. Okay, I think this is a strong contender. And now let's move on to the Star. What do we have here, Dia?
In the Star we have a box, a Pandora's box, which I'm supposing is Kenya. And the president opened it up. That's the analogy. And then the coronavirus went everywhere. And he says, "Oh my God, what have we done?"
And Kago is behind him.
And Kago is behind him. So I suppose what he's saying here is that with the president opening up the country for the sake of the economy, The cases have increased by 206% in just 1 month. But as we have said before, opening up the country was not predicated upon a decrease in infection. It was about an increase in preparedness. So it's about us being ready for the increase, for the spikes.
Absolutely.
All right.
I think Gado's cartoon spiked the most conversation, and for that,
do you guys, can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Do you think
Quickly.
more infections will make us more immune to corona?
Of course, we built herd immunity.
We are going to build herd immunity.
Yeah.
So
we could. It's a possibility.
okay, fantastic. That's all I just wanted to know.
All right. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Pre-Colonial Black Africa, a comparative study of the political and social systems of Europe and Black Africa from antiquity to the formation of modern states by Cheikh Anta Diop.
Indeed it is. So Cheikh Anta Diop was a Senegalese anthropologist, historian, politician, and physicist. And he was an African intellectual giant, one of our favorites here at the Fifth Estate.
Yep.
So he was very widely respected. And in this particular book, he talks about pre-colonial Black Africa. And he attempts to reconstruct African history and the Black African contribution to Western civilization. This is the kind of book that you don't see every day, because we see the opposite all the time. That is why it's a very important and seminal book. So in this book, Diop compares the political and social systems of Europe and Black Africa all the way back from the ancient times to the modern states that we know today. So one of the overriding theses in this book is that Africa had mighty civilizations long before the European armed invasions. And in the book, Cheikh Anta Diop discusses the political organization of Black Africa, economic organization, from barter trade all the way to modern day trade. He even talks about import and export back then in the 10th, 11th, 12th century in Africa, mode of transportation, economic wealth, and all those ways that Africa had organized itself to generate wealth and to build empires at that time. But most of all, and most importantly, I think, he also discusses the ideological superstructure that existed in Africa and that also formed the organization of society. And he demonstrates how Black African societies were driven by sophisticated and intellectual concepts. And that really what we draw from this book is that intellectual development is not a preserve of Europe or the West. It's something that is bizarre to say, but it is, I mean, it's bizarre to even have that argument because it shouldn't be. But unfortunately, that is what is in conjuncture history. We see in history all the time that it is Africa that drew anything that is intellectual, anything that is sophisticated from the West. In fact, in the prologue of this book, he says that almost no one has ever tried to find the key that unlocks the intelligence and understanding of African societies. So in this book, he does a really good job of demonstrating the very for instance, complex political structures that existed in Africa before the white man came. And these sophisticated structures included military strategy, included judicial systems and courts and all those things that are attributed to the West but actually existed here. One more thing, there's so much to say but we have run out of time. One thing that he also demonstrates is the geographical extent of the empires, of the African empires. And for you to have an emperor or empress who rules over such a wide geographical space, you have to have sophisticated systems.
Absolutely.
So
institutions.
And institutions. So this is a very interesting book. And I wish it could be incorporated into our education system for children to read this.
I love it. I love it. I was doing the chapter on social political evolution of the ancient city, but then I didn't like that title, so I made my own. Now, that my title is How Class Was Responsible in Perverting Religion. Now, he says originally there were two classes in Greco-Roman society. It was the Eupatridae and the plebeians, but I'll substitute Eupatridae with patricians. So the patricians and the plebeians. Now, the patricians were the class of the haves. They had it all right? Having property was seen to be, if you had property, you're seen to be of divine character. Only they could possess land, these patricians. They alone knew the sacred rites. They knew the prayers, which for a long time remained unwritten and could only be passed from father to son orally. All right, but they also had to remain, conservative using these methods, and they use mainly superstition and other methods of conservatism. Now, he says, therefore, they cannot be guilty of changing the dilution of religion, and the people who are guilty of changing the structure of religion were the plebs themselves. And here's what he says. He says the patricians are not this class that was responsible for the profanation of religion and the body of traditional beliefs, a profanation inseparable from what we have come to call Greek secular and rational thought. This was the work of the plebs. And this is how he defines the plebs. He says, these were the lowest class. They were made of fatherless children or bastards. They could possess no land, married without sacred rites, had no sacred prayers or religion. And he says, this is why they were the ones to trample upon tradition from its ultra-conservative changelessness, which might have otherwise continued until our time. This is what he's saying in other words. It's because of the alienation of the plebs from the patricians, they decided to come up with convoluted systems or concocted religious systems that have gone on until time. And he said if the plebs did not exist then we would still be having the old ultra-conservative methods of praying to our gods. Yeah.
Interesting. Let me speak about higher education in pre-colonial Black Africa, and this will be very short. So he describes university life in a place called Sankore in Timbuktu. And he says the student body were made up of all those, irregardless of age, who possessed an insatiable thirst for knowledge. And this learning primarily took place in mosques. The language of discourse, the language of education at that time was Islam. So courses lasted all day, interrupted only for prayers. Some scholars taught at night as well, some professors rather. And they would also hold tutorial sessions with their students to get more intimate teachings of the text. Now, professors, we're told, were not officially salaried. They taught for the love of teaching, and they derived tremendous respect and honor from society. However, every Wednesday, which was their day off, the pupils would bring their professors an honorarium. That is a payment given for professional services that are rendered nominally. And so, professors would get an average of about 1,725 cowries. And this was sometime in the 1500s that he's describing. Students would be expected to bring their own firewood to the tutorial sessions, which were either held at dawn or at dusk. And that's basically how university life was like in those days. As you mentioned, the African civilization has made a tremendous contribution to humanity, to mankind, over and above labor. We have contributed to theory, we have contributed to all sorts of fields, medicine, architecture, and so on, and so forth. And so on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Standard, I will leave you with this quote from Sheikh Anta Diop from his work on ancient Egypt. And he says, ancient Egypt was a Negro civilization. The history of Black Africa will remain suspended in air and cannot be written correctly until African historians dare to connect it with the history of Egypt. So do some reading on Egypt. Discover more about ourselves and our ancient civilizations, our past. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on your TV screens, Pang Free to Air, Go TV, and Star Times. See you.